Great.
Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started.
Huge crowd of people.
If everyone can make their way to their seats.
Dressed festive, so everybody dressed. I mean, there were some, like the Huns were
Member
there,
Ramos.
and, it was
We're going to get started. All good.
it was really fun.
Raving about 34th Street. I understand.
I mean,
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Public Safety and Government Operations Committee meeting. In attendance today, we have myself, Chair of the Committee, representing the 4th District, Councilman Burnett, representing the 8th District, Councilman Cohen, representing the 1st District, and Councilwoman Ramos, representing the 14th District.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representing the Office of the President, I have Aaron DeGraffenwright, and representing the Mayor's Office, I've got Sophia G. This afternoon, the committee will have a hearing on legislative oversight 22-0029 for the Baltimore City Fire Department apparatus maintenance and replacement for the purpose of requesting the fire chief to present information to the Public Safety and Government Operations Committee on apparatus maintenance and replacement. This bill was introduced on November 7th, 2022, and it was sponsored by myself. So I called this hearing today as this issue was brought to my attention by a number of folks who were really worried about the condition of our vehicles in the fleet, and particularly how it affects our operations. We know this is a long-standing issue that we've had across all of our agencies, but I would especially say that for our fire department, our first responders, folks really count on us to be there. And if we don't have the trucks, the vehicles, and otherwise to do that, it could be really bad. So, I understand there are significant concerns about our ability to maintain our current vehicles, in part due to our inability to replace them at certain points in history. And so we're dealing with a backlog of sorts today that is then exacerbated by some of the supply chain issues that we're seeing across the world. So I wanted to bring everybody in the room today to have a conversation about what we're dealing with, what we expect to see, and even more what we can do to make sure this never happens again. So with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to the fire department. We're going to have an opportunity here from, of course, the agencies, from the fire department, general services, and we don't have finance here, but nonetheless, I think we'll be able to get that feedback. And we'll also have an opportunity to hear from our fire unions to kind of get some more perspective on what they're seeing on the ground. Hopefully, we can come together with some suggestions that help us be a little smarter going forward about our apparatus and our vehicles. So with that, I'm going to hand off to the fire department.
Thank you, Councilman. Afternoon to everyone. Thank you for having us here. What that came with me is I'm Charles Savella, Assistant Chief Charles Savella. Currently, I'm Acting Chief of the Fire Department. To my right, I have Assistant Chief Christopher Case of Community Risk Reduction and Support Services. Next to him is Acting Deputy Chief Ty Spencer, who is the deputy that falls under Chief Case. And on the end, I have Assistant Chief Dante Stewart, Assistant Chief of Operations. We're here to give you a presentation. I think is probably the best way for us to do it, so we can actually show you the issues that we're dealing with and what's in our plan and some of the problems we've had getting to where we want to be with our plans. We're having issues that every department and jurisdiction is having with this type of apparatus problems that we're dealing with. They're continuing to work consistently to try to get it resolved. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Acting Deputy Chief Spencer. She has a PowerPoint that she wants to put forth, and hopefully this will take care of a lot of the answers that you're looking for. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Acting Deputy Chief Ty Spencer. I'm in charge of logistics right now. So we put together a short PowerPoint to just kind of explain the replacement and repair of the vehicles that we currently have. Let's see. Okay, our apparatus purchasing is done through Fleet, DGS. We use the master lease programs, which they control the amounts that we get each year. And we also buy a lot of our vehicles through the Amos grant. The current fiscal year '23 award was $1,340,819, which is matched. So we do have, a limited amount of funds to buy the apparatus. Our current fleet, we currently, first line units, 35 engines, 17 trucks, 1 rescue, 1 hazmat, 1 fireboat, 2 fire rescue boats, multiple support vehicles across the department. I did leave off one thing. We do have 35 first line transport medic units that we keep in service daily. So the goal for our first line fleet is 10-year replacement on all of our engines and trucks. 3 years for the EMS transport units. There's a difference there because our EMS transport units run constantly, so the wear and tear on those vehicles is much greater than the engines and the trucks. To keep this goal, we will need to purchase 4 engines and 2 trucks, 1 specialty unit, and 10 EMS units each year. That would keep us within the 10 and 3. The specialty units, like the hazmat, the heavy rescue, their replacement is all based off of the wear and tear on those vehicles because they are specialty. They don't run like a consistent amount all the time. From 2009 to 14 is where the replacement of our apparatus fell off. So during this time, we only purchased 8 engines, 4 trucks, and 28 EMS transport units for that time span. We should have been purchasing 24 engines, 12 trucks, and in 24 EMS, we had 24 EMS units in service at that time, so we needed to purchase 48. So we were way off of the amounts that we needed to keep up with the standard.
Can you repeat those numbers one more time?
So we purchased between 2009 and 14, 8 engines, 4 trucks, 28 EMS transport units. We needed to purchase 24 engines, 12 trucks, and 48 EMS transport units during that time span. So like I said, we were off the mark with that.
Hey, Mr. Chair, could I ask a just quick qualifying?
Please, go ahead.
Just, could you share why? Like, that's a huge discrepancy. Why were we so off the mark?
So I wasn't in charge of logistics or any part of purchasing at that time, but to my knowledge, funding for the fire department was cut drastically during that time, and that funding got cut from vehicle purchases. So we were pretty much trying to lengthen out the amount of time that these units could be viable on the street.
Okay. I'll save further commentary for later. Thanks.
Thank you. Please continue.
Starting in 2015, we aggressively started purchasing vehicles again. From 2015 to today, we have purchased 37 engines, 15 trucks, and 73 EMS transport units. Of those, we have received 30 engines. It says 10 trucks. We do have 10 trucks. We have 3 coming, but right now we've only taken receipt of 7. We have 3 coming in the first half of next year. And we have 47 transport units that we've received out of the ones that we have purchased. So there is a supply chain issue that is making these times longer.
Can you give, just for edification, when do we make the order? And
These were
roughly?
purchased at all different times. I don't have the spreadsheet here when everything was purchased,
Okay.
but over that time span,
It's
that is
rolling.
what we purchased.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. So this goes into reasons for the delays. Of course, COVID-19 has drastically delayed everything. Our production time since COVID has We had an engine was 9 months and the truck was 12 months. Right now, we're being given dates of over 3 years.
Can you move the mic a little closer here?
Sorry. I was saying that COVID-19, of course, supply chain, everything is slower. What typically took 9 months for an engine and 12 months for a year, we're getting dates of over 3 years right now. From the time we put the purchase order in to the time we receive it. Labor shortages, production of parts, receipt of parts, all of that delays the units that we get. EMS transport units have a production time based upon availability of the chassis. We currently have 20 units that we are waiting to see if we're going to get chassis for that have been ordered in the past 2 years that we've been waiting for. All right. So these again are the numbers broken down of what's been ordered and what's been received. Like I said, 37 engines, we've only received 30, 15 trucks, we've actually received 7, 73 EMS transport units, we've only received 47. And the EMS transport units, that leaves 26 units that we're waiting to receive. So in order to keep the fleet at the 10 and 3 year replacement goal, like I said, we need to purchase 4 engines, 2 trucks, a specialty unit, 10 EMS transport units each year. And this also in turn lengthens the life expectancy of the reserve units because the first line units go into reserve when we buy new ones. So that right now, our reserve fleet is as well pretty old because we're having trouble getting the new units in. So as the new units come in, we'll get they'll go into reserve status, and this will give us a healthier reserve fleet. Like I said, the first half of 2023, we are slated to receive 3 engines and 3 trucks. Once we get these units in, we will have reached the goal of all of our first line engines and trucks being under 10 years old. We have the 20 EMS transport units. Once those come in, we do have an additional 5 that just got placed on order. We will receive our goal of 3 years for each EMS transport unit. And that is all for that presentation.
Thank you. Before I go over to the fire unions, I want to create an opportunity if General Services has anything they want to add.
Thank you, everyone. I don't have a presentation, but I can provide some background information about the question the councilman asked about why that was little.
State your name and.
I'm sorry, this is Berke Atilla, and I'm the Director of Department of General Services. Thank you for that, I appreciate it. The city, until that we instituted the master lease program, was spending about $6 million in entire equipment and vehicle purchases. And that's in itself why the numbers are the numbers. In 2014, leading up, we came up with a different way of replacing our assets. It is called master lease, which we borrow. Previously, we were paying everything cash. This allowed us to be able to 5-fold increase the number of assets the city is purchasing because we would pay them over a period of time that will give us the ability to finance more. With that, I believe the $24 million, and I have the breakdown here we can share later down the road, we really work with fire department, excluding the Amos grants. The total money spent, the 28% of the total dollars spent on master lease since its inception was with the fire department. And think about this, the other competitors are DPW, DOT, police, rec and parks, and all of the administrative vehicles. So we did understand early on working with fire the importance of really replacing aggressively the most important assets. But the reality is that the $24 million that we started this program back in 2014 remain $24 million as of today. Anybody who can do a simple math would understand the inflationary changes that cost us in a way that we had to reduce the number of assets that each year we're producing under the master lease. So add that to the inflation now with the COVID delays, we're experiencing why some of those assets are not in our control right now. But what we're doing, we're talking to Finance Department A to revisit the $24 million general pie. We want to increase the pie to inflation adjust so that we can actually continue to procure the same amount of assets that we were doing in 2014. So that needs to be increased. And then there are things that procedurally that I think in our control collectively, BOE, Council, Finance Department, and us, if we can start borrowing long-term, multi-year borrowings and execute those agreements, that will allow us to be able to place orders in multi-years. This is a concept that we would like to entertain because right now, each year, we put the requirement to borrow into our budget. The budget goes through the approvals. Once the funding is approved, we wait for July 1st. We have the appropriation in place for that particular year, $24 million. Then we put an authority to go into the bid in the BOE. Then we bid for who we're going to borrow from. Then we borrow. All of this takes time. Once we do that, now the cash is secured. Now we're free to go out and put the POs in place. Then the supply chain takes whatever and however long that is going to take. So what we're trying to do, looking at the charter, looking at the budget process, working with finance and the administration's office to see if there is a better way to do this. Because if we can identify that we need to buy 888 on the next 3 years, 24 apparatus that needs to be purchased, rather than starting every year anew, if we could do 3-year contracts, obviously the first year delivery is going to take whatever it's going to take. But if we already placed the second and the third year, by the third year rolled in, we would have gotten in control most of our assets instead of waiting 3 years after each purchase order. So those are the things we're doing outside of our replacement prioritization. When we meet with departments, we look at very qualitative data from our point of view of how many times this asset has been down, what is the mileage on it, what year is it, and then we produce a list and we work with the departments and then they say, okay, this is what we need to replace, this is how much we can share from the $24 million with you, what are you purchasing under Amos grant, what's left, let's refine this list and then go. But as I said, there are things that we could start doing early on if we change the approach to the borrowing schedule. I think that would be the biggest improvement to cut down some of these lead times because we could put multi-year purchases. It's not easy. It requires a lot of financial gymnastics, but I think there is a way out if we collaborate. And we're happy to share the numbers of each year under the $24 million, what has been allocated for each department and what has been purchased. And I verified with my team here, Chief Lyons and Deputy Chief Abrar, they're here. We can produce where some of these orders are. Is it waiting to be placed? Is placed being delivered? Chassis is being made? All of those things we can provide you if you need to. That's my statement, unless you have any other questions.
Thank you for now. You're welcome to have a seat until we
Thank
open
you.
up for questions. Next, I'm going to open up to, we don't have a representative from finance here today, do we, Sophia? No one from finance? Okay, not a problem. I think we should be able to cover most of what we need to discuss regardless. Next, I want to open up to our fire unions. We've got representatives Joshua Fannin and Rich Langford here who really brought this issue to my attention, and which is why I wanted to have an opportunity to talk it through. So I want to offer you guys the opportunity to provide some additional context on how we perceive this is affecting our guys on the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the Public Safety and Government Operations Committee, for taking time out of your day to further shine a light on this very serious issue. My name's Josh Fannin. I'm the president of the IEFF Local 964 Baltimore Fire Officers, representing the lieutenants, captains, and battalion chiefs of Baltimore City Fire Department. Wanted to tell you a brief story, which was the beginning of 2020 thereabouts. It was announced that we were going to be closing and permanently disbanding 3 fire company units. It led to an outcry from the communities that were going to be affected, which is good, although sometimes people don't realize that that effect is actually felt citywide because you have less resources to respond to emergencies. To his great credit, Mayor Brandon Scott, one of the first things that he did was make sure that that was not going to happen and those companies were not going to be permanently disbanded. Having said that, that was when we were talking about 3 companies. As of this moment, as far as I'm aware, we are down 5 companies this date, truck companies. Now, a truck company is the easiest way to explain, the long ladder truck with the big ladder on top. Their primary responsibility on a fire ground is life safety, searching for trapped victims, grabbing them and removing them to safety, amongst many, many other things, which I'm not going to go into. We have a total of 17 that are permanently staffed. We're down 5. That is a 30% reduction in our ability to respond with those units. And this is not because we don't have the staffing for it. It's not because we don't have the funding for it. It's because we don't have the physical apparatus for it. And that is an unacceptable situation. It puts a lot of our members at risk. It puts the communities at risk that they serve. And we have just gotten some information on how it is that we got here. Some of the things that we spoke to in our joint letter together was that this is a situation that we could point fingers about how we got here, but we are here. We have to get our way out of here, and we have to find a way to make sure that this never happens again. Granted, we didn't know COVID was coming. Nobody did. But you could see we were way behind the 8 ball for many, many years, and that threw an additional complication in getting back up to speed. So I appreciate your time, and I look forward to assisting in any way we can that we could correct these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Langford.
Good afternoon, Chair and council members. Thank you for allowing us to speak today. I'm Rich Langford, President of Baltimore Firefighters, Local 734. We brought this issue to light because it's been going on for a few years now. Today, as of today, we have lost 480 days this year of apparatus out of service. I know we have a long-term plan, hearing from finance today, but what are we going to do short-term? These apparatus not on the road today is a safety issue. It's a safety for our members. It's a safety for the citizens of Baltimore. So we have to figure something not only to fix the long-term plan, but something very short-term to get us through this so we can get all this apparatus in. Hopefully, we're all willing to work together. I know we heard that some of this issue came from funding being cut years ago. Hopefully, we can figure a way to make sure that never happens again and we don't get in this position. Thank you.
Thank you both, and I really want to thank you guys for bringing it to our attention. Of course, we as a committee and as a council can't have our eyes and ears everywhere, but it certainly helps when you guys bring these issues to our attention so that we can figure out how we can work with our agencies to prevent this from happening in the future and, of course, resolve our issues today. I'm going to open up the floor to questions from the committee. I'm going to start with 2 of my own. First, I want to get an understanding of our fleet today. What is the average age of our fleet? I know we only have a couple that are outside of that 30 and, 10.
The average age of the apparatus?
Yes.
I guess best to answer it, this is Lieutenant Gus Siegel. He's our apparatus coordinator, fire apparatus coordinator. He would have all those.
Good afternoon. Our oldest engine we currently have in service is going to be reserve service is a 2003. Our oldest medic unit is a 2005. Our ladder trucks are 2003 and a 2004. They're currently in the shop being worked on.
And do you have a sense of the average age?
So we just took delivery in January of 5 Pierce engines. They are deemed 2022s. And we just took delivery of 5 Seagraves that are deemed 2022s. So the age range is in there. I don't have an exact,
No problem. I think what I'm trying to get to is an understanding, just knowing that I'd say police and fire, we run our vehicles incredibly hard. And certainly our EMS units, like we run them to the ground, which is why we expect that they only last 3 years. So what I was trying to get a sense for is with an average age, how many are nearing toward that 10-year mark, and how is that going to affect us in the coming years?
So right now, our oldest first line is a 2008, and its replacement is in the build process. And obviously, we have 35 engines, so if the oldest one is 08, we're midway in our range.
Yeah.
The ladder truck is a 2007. I have 2 of those left. And those, both of those are being built as we speak with delivery in Q1 of next year, or yes.
You said,
Excuse me.
sure.
DGS, so the average age for medic units is 6.2 years. Ladder trucks, it's 11.4. Any engines, it's 10.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, you noted earlier one of the oldest vehicle right now is a 2003. We're looking at a 19-year-old vehicle. In a couple of days will be a 20-year-old vehicle.
Correct. Yes, sir.
That's most of my life. So it's more than half of my life. So I think we know we've had this issue for some time. And these are first line trucks or second line?
Sir, Christopher Case, Assistant Chief of Support Services. The oldest ones that Lieutenant Siegel was talking about are reserves,
Okay.
right? So right now, when we do receive the apparatus this coming year, first part of 2022, we'll have the youngest first-line fleet, and I went back to the 1930s, and it'll be the youngest first-line fleet we've ever had. The average age, or I'm sorry, I can't say the average age, but the oldest first-line engine and truck will be about 9.5 years.
Got it.
And that will drastically increase our maintenance, or not increase our maintenance costs, but reduce our maintenance costs. And we also, our reserve fleet won't be as old either.
Got it. Thank you. How many vehicles, again, were you expecting to replace this year to transition out of the fleet, or do we have that rough number again? Specifically, what I want to understand is, as we are buying new vehicles, how do we determine that number of new vehicles that we're going to purchase? I know we're capped today at $24 million for the entire fleet. How do we determine how much of that goes to the fire department for replacing apparatus? And then how do we determine what apparatus gets prioritized, if you can?
Again, Barki Atila, Director, Department of General Services. It's a tough exercise because you know that you're making tough decisions by delaying one important asset for another department and trading off with one. We generally prioritize public safety and sanitation over competing, and then generally our sedans and administrative assets, obviously, we can push them farther. What we look at is we look at utilization and then downtime. And if the utilization and downtime or those assets and the M&R costs are rising, from our mathematical standpoint, we request those assets to be purchased. But we try to at least not give more than a quarter of any of the 25 to 30% would be the cap when we just front load what needs to be replaced from oldest to newest or the most problematic to new. We tally up the projected dollar values, and then we see this might require $40 million this year, but we're going to be able to do only 8. This fiscal year, FY23, we have about $8 million allocated for fire replacement, which represents about 31%. Again, we're just like, that's kind of our max that we could allow for any single department to get it in. So I believe and we don't want to replace everything at the same time, because then everything will be due at the same time. So there is greater value in smoothing the purchases over multiple years. We collaborate with the departments based on what they need, and we make hard decisions based on what we hear from everyone, and then do a lot of back and forth with, okay, DPW, can we wait for this to happen like last year or this year? But DGS have a lot of control on how we're going to allocate that $24 million.
That's really helpful. I asked that question because Mr. Fannin brought up a really interesting fact that I did not know, that of the 17 units that we are fully staffed, and barely we're able to do that. 5 are sitting on the sidelines right now because we don't have vehicles. And I was curious if considerations like that are taken into account when we determine whether or not we need to replace those vehicles sooner or not. Of course, wear and tear on the vehicles, condition of the vehicle, that makes a lot of sense. And I know we're great at doing that. We're probably, are we still using Faster? No, we're
Yeah,
not using Faster.
Faster.
Are we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we really crunch the data really well and have a good sense of the condition of our vehicles as we replace them. But I'm thinking operationally. How do we bake in the operational considerations, knowing that we have men that are prepared and capable of working and responding on the streets, but don't have vehicles to sit in? I'm just curious if that's something that we could take into consideration.
We do. So we have some visibility to operations, but we will never be at the same level as our departments. We track our critical fleet availability across divisions and departments on a daily basis twice. That was part of the gain sharing program to meet. So I even get a numerical figure of how many needs to be available in a given day, how many that are available, and how many that are in the shop on a daily manner. So that we could look at if this service availability is becoming a problem, and then we could prioritize in our mathematical list, which I mentioned, that we look at just like the utilization, downtime, how much it has cost. Sometimes it's good to look at how much it has cost, because if you completely revamp the engine and build a new chassis, you don't want to replace that now. So just by looking at the age is not enough. So maybe what I'm trying to say is we do our analysis, but do not make deterministic decisions, final decisions, without sharing that list with our partner departments, which we rely on them to take a look at it and say, we rather replace this and that because we're just having issues in this service delivery, and then we take that into consideration and swap assets. So that part of the work has been always very collaborative. We do our due diligence because we do have a 10-year financial plan that we look at over the next 10 years, what makes sense to replace. So we can any given year produce a year out, 2 years out, 3 years outlook, share with our partner agencies and seek their input. While we're waiting, all of the other financial aspects of the borrowing and then purchasing come to life, we spend that time. This part of the budget process, because what happens is when we borrow the $24 million, the payback, the principal of interest, is allocated at an asset level, that it becomes the agency's budget to bring it to us. So by doing that, we force the planning aspect of the vehicle replacement into the budget formulation. What we could do, again, if we could make that $24 million a higher dollar value, I think everybody will be able to get a little bit more. And the decisions can be made if we have additional $5 million. The first 3 years of that $5 million can be only programmed to replace X, Y, and Z. I think we have really good data for us to be able to do that, and I will ask my partners here to comment on our collaboration. But my previous time as the CFO in DGS, I was very involved, and I am now involved as a director, and I see that partnership is still very strong.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I have questions about, and either my colleagues or it'll come back to me about that increase from 24 to whatever we're looking to increase it to, so that we can more appropriately address those concerns. I want to finish the tail end of my question about operations for the fire department. How do we bake that into our considerations for our asks to DGS and finance? When does that come into play? For instance, when we put in our requests last year for the vehicles coming in now, was our the consideration for units that are not on the street because they didn't have a vehicle, was that a part of the consideration, and how's that?
So I just wanted, first of all, I probably should have mentioned it in the beginning.
Sure.
We're kind of going through a little bit of a transition right now in the fire department, so you have to excuse that we'll be passing back and forth to the proper subject matter experts that can answer these questions.
Sure.
So that's kind of why we're not disorganized. We're just trying to get our point across so that we're giving you accurate information, because we're all working together to try to get a handle on the issues that we're dealing with the apparatus. Just so you know, when we're talking about money, the average prices for the apparatus that we're purchasing, if we're looking at medic units, that's about $300,000 for that. $850 for engines, and $1.5 million for trucks. So as you can see, they're quite expensive. So that plays a part also in what we're doing. So I'll let Chief Case speak on how he's been working with DGS on prioritizing what we're replacing and how we're doing it, because he's the one that's been working on it for the past several years.
All right, so we start with maintenance costs. General Services provides us with a breakdown of all our units every year, and what the original initial cost of the unit it was, and the maintenance over the years, the total maintenance. And often, the total maintenance is more than we pay for the unit. So we go over with General Services the units that are costing us the most money, and the ones that are out of service the most, and they're the ones that we're going to replace. When we also, if we have more units we want to replace, we use William H. Amos State of Maryland grant funding to purchase, basically supplement the the master lease. And that's pretty much it. So we'll go back to General Services with that, and they'll say, okay, yep, we got the money for this, and you can replace this, and so.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Sure.
One suggestion I would make, and I'm sure we do this to some degree, but maybe we need to be tighter, I don't know, is making sure that our operations align with our apparatus, such that we don't end up in situations where we've got the men, but we don't have the vehicles, and so those men are useless to us, not useless, but can't work at their highest level. So, and women, excuse me. So just a note, since we're having this discussion. With that, I'm going to actually turn over to my colleagues. I'm going to start on the far end and work our way this way. And I want to acknowledge Councilwoman Porter, who's joined the meeting, and Councilman Glover, who's also joined the meeting. Councilman Cohen, floor is
Thank you,
yours.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief, to the union officials that are here, to all the brave women and men serving in our department. Appreciate you being here. I will say that I am deeply concerned about the overall functioning of this department at this moment. I think it is relevant and somewhat of an elephant in this room to say that we just read a report. It was extensive about a fatal fire on Stricker Street that showed patterns and practices of what I would say is shoddy management, shoddy leadership. Folks lost their lives as a result. I think that from the top down, we need to make sure that we are focused on, first, procurement, making sure we have the equipment that we need, and second, just clear management and chains of command so that we don't have confusion, which ultimately leads to death of members of our department. So we'll just say that I am concerned about this department. I often say we have the best firefighters in all of America. We have some of the bravest women and men and people in this department, but I am concerned about where we are right now in terms of leadership, and the idea that we are 5 trucks short, again, raises significant concerns. Understanding the full backstory, how we got here, 2014, the master lease, us in the past not spending enough money, but we are 5 trucks short, which means that folks aren't able to get to fires. Other folks then in other parts of the city don't have the resources that they need. And as we've heard today, it's a huge, there are serious impacts and implications for saving human life. So I guess my question is, I would love to know, to the best of your ability, and perhaps DGS as well, just a really clear timeline on how we right size, how we get to a place where we're not, doing this again a year from now, 2 years from now. How, as a department, and again, I realize, Chief Savelis, that we are in a transition, that there is flux, that there's leadership movement and all the rest. So this is a challenging time to be having this conversation, but it just seems there needs to be a clear plan put in place with timelines, with deliverables, with deadlines, so that we don't have a cascading situation, which we now find ourselves in, which is we're essentially in some ways paying for the sins of the past, but also not where we need to be currently. So just kind of was hoping you could articulate just how we're going to, and whether you as the acting leader of the department can produce a really clear set of timelines. And I do understand COVID, I understand the delays in the supply chain, I understand just the challenges with getting the apparatus online, all of it, but I think the citizens that we represent deserve clarity around how we get from here to there and what the deliverables and the metrics and the data and the timelines all kind of look like from this point.
Okay. So just to let you know, we are developing, and like I said, we are transitioning, which means myself, Chief Case, Chief Stewart, we've been meeting daily. We're trying to create that plan with that timeline so that we could give it to you. We also have other issues that we're dealing with as far as staffing, dealing with the report. We could have a discussion about the report at a later date. And we understand what was in that report, but we are right now working diligently, all 3 of us, and Chief Clark as well, to create what is needed to move the department forward in the direction that we needed to go into. So to give you sit here to say today that I can give you a timeline, I cannot right today, but we can, and we're going to work on that to get that to you and to make sure that we let this council know exactly where we're heading and what we're doing. Now, any timelines we give you, you have to remember that we're held to supply chains and all those type of things. So we could do our best to get you as accurate a timeline as we can, but if we have outside obstacles that we run into, that's something that could affect those timelines. So those are things that we're working with DGS, and we're trying to make that happen because the apparatus that we have, we understand the issues that we're at, but we also need the new ones are expensive. Going out and buying other apparatus, we're not going out to buy used vehicles. We need to make sure they meet what our standards are for safety, staffing, and all the things that we have to do to make that happen. So, you know, right now, with what we're going through, yes, we're going to do the best we can to provide the services to the citizens of Baltimore. We're still doing a great job. The men and women out in the field are doing a fantastic job. It's our responsibility to get them the support and the resources they need to make that happen. And we take that seriously. And that's what we're going to do, all of us. And that's how we're going to move forward with this department. So as far as the leadership and all that, I can tell you, I mean, me and you have had conversations before. I've been in this job 41 years, and I know what it takes for this fire department to get done what needs to be done. But you have to realize that we're going to need some time right now to make that happen, and we're going to. So I rest assured we will be working on all these issues that we have right now.
So, Chief, when can we expect that timeline?
A week. We can get it to you in a week. I can get you something. What's today? See, my days are running together. Today's Wednesday. I can get you something by next Wednesday with an estimated timeline on some replacement.
Okay, great.
Fair enough?
Yep, appreciate that. On that same note, though, you know, you mentioned we're not going to purchase used material, used engines, or used trucks. I guess I am curious, you know, as a stopgap, I mean, this seems like something of an emergency situation, given that we are 5 down, which represents a large percentage. While we don't want to purchase defective or ineffective equipment, you know, is there a situation where it does make sense for us to, as a stopgap, purchase used trucks? I mean, if it's available, just knowing all the issues that you've already articulated and the delays in the global supply chain and everything else, I'm curious why we're shutting that door.
Well, just with all due respect, sir, I never said we're not going to do it. We're going to look closely at what we purchase. And I'll let the Chief Case explain exactly what it is that we do if we're making those purchases.
Yes, sir. We actually have recently made used purchases. We did buy a used truck from a volunteer company up in Pennsylvania. It met our standards, it met our specifications. It's right now running as a first line truck 26 while truck 26 gets fixed. We just also recently purchased a used medic unit. And we scour the internet daily looking for these. And we talk to other departments and who, you know, people are selling things. And most of the time, these units come back. We've even sent people up to Pennsylvania to look at some things, and they're junk. Best word I could use, because every department in the country is waiting for a new truck to be built for 3.5 years. Now that's the new timelines for a truck. So everybody's scouring the internet and talking to other people, and anything that comes up that's really, wow, that's a great piece of apparatus, they're snatching it up as fast as they can. So we're trying, but it's just there's not a lot available out there that would meet our standards or that's actually worth bringing into the city without it being just a total maintenance issue.
Understood. Just knowing that this is a bit of a crisis situation and that there just needs to be a very clear sense of urgency on purchasing whatever equipment. My final question, and I sort of wish we had finance here, this may be a DGS question, but just so that I can wrap my head around it, is there sort of a funding gap? Like, is this a situation where we, the mayor, should be doing some kind of supplemental, or is it really about just it takes multiple years to get the trucks, to get the equipment? Because again, it sounded from the previous conversation like the issue sort of started over a underfunding question back in under, I guess, Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake. So just if you could just maybe provide some clarity on whether we currently have enough funding to purchase the equipment that we need, or do we need supplemental? Kind of where's it at?
So when we first started it, we didn't have the supply chain issues, and then we were fivefold what we were purchasing. So it was a great start. So what happened over the years, because the apparatus prices and every asset, not just the apparatus, engine, or medics, everything got more expensive, but we did not increase the dollar figure over the last 10 years. So that's one of the problems. So if we had kept up with the inflation, increased that $24 million, today adjusted to, let's say, $32 million, we would have been able to keep up with the pace of replacement. So that's number one. Number two, in our locus of control, is that how quickly we can get to the suppliers to start ordering these assets, knowing that it's going to take a constant amount of time, which has now increased from almost 12 to 15 months to 30 months. So that's something that we cannot control, but what we can control is how quickly we make the order. And we tell them, year one, we're going to buy this much, year two, we're going to buy this much, and year three, we're going to buy this many. And they can start working on them in advance, knowing that July 1st, we will want to take the delivery. So as I said early on, the first year, the upcoming year is not going to benefit from it, but 2 years down the road, you will see that there are more coming in. Completed with or complemented with the increased dollar value will be amazing benefit for us to then increase the number of assets that we're buying, because right now, we're below the status quo, below the initial replacement plan for 10 years when we looked at it in 2014, and then we had a 10-year replacement program. We said each year we're going to do this, and in 10 years we would have had replaced XYZ amounts of in these classes, and then the average age and then the condition of the fleet in fire would be this. We're behind that because we couldn't execute for many reasons. Inflation on certain assets was way more than was expected, not just COVID. I mean, prior to COVID, we baked in our financial model expecting the asset price is going to go up 5%, but sometimes it went up 15%. But that's part of the modeling issue. We could do that. And to your earlier question, when you said, like, how can we see a plan together? So plan has multiple components. Number one, desired stage. Define desired stage, because we know our status quo. We just share the average age number. So we do not want the average age of the fleet to be 2 years, because we do not want to replace assets that are ahead of their life cycle. So and then the industry standards are there, and we don't want to become close to that. So we kind of know what would be an ideal stage of an average age of the assets, and we know how many that are in our shop. We can then model it out. If we were to achieve this in 5 years, bring the average age down to this one, we could completely come up with a number of assets that needs to be replaced within that time period, as well as a projected cost to do that. We can produce that to see, and if we do that for every other department, we could come back to and to say the dollar value should be $40 million, $37 million, as opposed to the 24 that we have. At that part, maybe the conversation could be, do we want to do supplemental for a couple of years to bridge that gap? Do we want to increase the amount for one time and put this sort of an inflation adjustment? But these are the things that I believe that, again, we as a city have a little bit more control over. And that allows us to be able to order more and order early. That would, in return, cut down the amount of time it takes for us to take delivery. That takes the burden off of our bench, because now we have to keep a larger size of equipment in service because we can't get the new one in, and then they fail constantly, which produces this problem. But the modeling side, we could work with fire department to give you a different scenario. If we increase the amount to this over the next 5 years, we could get to that desired stage to be determined at 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. And then we can see what kind of a balancing act as a city we could do to do that. Either we extend our goal or we increase the financing, and then do certainly different ways of procurement. I think that would be a big thing that we need to address. The way in which we can order these multi-year orders would be our best bet to cut down the time that we do not control.
No, I appreciate that, and I look forward in a week to seeing some of that modeling. And I will just say that, this is the kind of transparency that I think as a council we expect is to be able to have this conversation consistently, to not in any way hide the ball, to make sure that, you know, we're really clear on where we are in terms of our assets and where the gaps are, where the deficits are, because, you know, our unions are rightly have shared a lot of concern with us as members on the council, and it is my hope that for the department moving forward that there's the shared sense of transparency and urgency, and that at the end of the day, it's not about pointing fingers, but that we are figuring the problem out.
I just want to note one thing, that the week turnaround was by fire. I just want to make sure that they produce their requirements for us, and then I would take another maybe week for us to model it out how to achieve that. So I'm not extending for like months, but we would need to probably have at least 2 weeks to produce something that is meaningful that we can defend, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, 2 weeks is fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Can we try and get that before the end of year? Is that
You said 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
In 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I might reach out to see if there are scenarios in which that the council is interested so that we can prepare for that. And if I understand correctly, we're going to look at, with the fire's point of view, what is an ideal state of a fleet looks like. We know our current stage, and then different modeling scenarios to get us there, and then the dollars and the timelines associated with it. I just want to make sure that I understand the task correctly.
Got it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk about maintenance, if I can. We had a scenario this year, it was the end of last year, where Truck 21 was broken down. I visited Truck 21 a few months later. They had just got, well, maybe it was 2 months later. They had just gotten Truck 21 back, and the instant that I rang the doorbell, Truck 21 died again, 2 months later, right? Now we have a new Truck 21, so I'm very happy about this. But this was last year. So my question is, what is the average time frame for repair of our apparatus? And you know, even though our apparatus is older, I would imagine it takes longer with older apparatus. But even when we get new apparatus in, we have to fix them. So it was my understanding from talking with some of our firefighters that, you know, we're waiting months for our apparatus to come back to us. And we don't have enough reserves. Last year, again, around this time, I know that Truck 21 at the time was out. And we have a lot going on in that neighborhood over the holidays, and I can't not have a truck there, you know? So we were able to get a reserve, but that took a reserve from somewhere else, right? So can you tell me a little bit about how maintenance was done in the past, how maintenance is done now, what are some of the average time frames? And as we look to, you know, figure, I mean, again, the older trucks probably take longer, but I want to understand this maintenance piece a little bit more as we get into, again, because we're going to have to maintain our apparatus anyway, even if we buy new, you know, something's going to happen. So I don't want to have our engines out for months, is what I'm saying.
We neither. So we are in alignment there. So because we have a very good system of work order tracking, I'm pretty sure that we should be able to produce some average maintenance durations to share with you. Obviously, not every problem is the same, so average could be a little bit meaningless at some, but we would like to look at just like the most common frequent repairs and how long it takes. So what happened, I believe I can agree to that. Extended turnaround times is here to stay, and then one of the reasons why it's there, outside of the age of the asset, and then having to use that asset more aggressively because we're not bringing new assets quickly puts a lot of burden on the equipment, then it fails. And at times when it fails, and this is not finger point to anyone, but sometimes the departments have to make the tough decision to keep that asset on the street versus maybe bringing for a small repair or a PM. So because they have to produce that. Sometimes we miss certain things on that could have been a shorter, quicker fix that becomes a larger problem. But what I want to focus is here, that we are extremely experiencing the highest vacancy rate, not just in fleet, but everywhere, in our vendors as well. Mechanics are really hard to find. COVID did not help. Right now, if I'm correct, we have about 40 mechanic positions? Yes. 40 mechanics positions that are
I'm sorry, 40 mechanics positions vacant?
vacant. And we've been actively trying to I mean, it's nobody's fault. I'm not pointing any fingers, but the market is what it is right now. And please keep that in mind, when we're trying to hire mechanics, we're not just competing with the other jurisdictions, but we're competing with BGE, Amazon, FedEx, UPS, any other place that does delivery. So they have their own fleet shops. They maintain their own apparatus. So we're really competing with the private. So it is hard to fill these positions. But what happens is also the vendors are short-handed. So that is one of the main reasons why we're experiencing more than accepted timelines for repair turnarounds in-house and our vendors, because industry is short-handed.
Quickly, Director, what percentage of positions is that roughly? So 40 out of, a rough number is sufficient for now. You can get us the actual number.
40 out of 135. Thank you, Chief Lyons, for
Still, that's a lot.
That is a lot.
And that's for our city's entire fleet or just for the fire
No,
department?
it is the city's fleets mechanics composition,
So
DGS.
DGS total.
Yeah.
But don't we have, I mean, the fire apparatus is a pretty special apparatus.
Correct.
So don't we have some specialists?
Yes, I can provide, of the 40, how many of them are actually specialized.
specialized.
Yes, we can
Okay.
provide that, absolutely.
Because the other thing is, I thought at one point the mechanics would actually go to the firehouse and try to, I could be wrong, but fix it there. But now we actually bring the apparatus into the shop. And I guess I'm just trying to, so part of this is just, shorthanded in terms of mechanics.
And parts, I would add.
And parts, which
Parts
is a supply
availability. Yes,
chain
correct.
issue. But that's, it's pretty disturbing that that's what's going on. The other thing is that, just going into the vacancy, if I can, Mr. Chair, again, it's very specialized, I understand that. But we also, I represent Mervo, so that's a specialized CTE career school that actually does auto mechanics. I know it's different than fire, but, there's got to be a way.
We are working with them.
Has to be a
No,
way to go to our CTEs and say, we need to train you for this specialized thing. There has to be a way. We can't just say we've got 40 vacancies and that's it.
Oh, yeah, I didn't want to say that just like, we have 40 vacancies, that's it. I just want to give the factually, where we are.
That, yeah.
And since I have arrived, I'm working very closely with fleet management, with my HR team, as well as the DHR, the central HR. We're looking at various, first of all, we're not only not being able to fill, but we're also bleeding by people leaving for better jobs. So we're entertaining a couple of different options for, there are many ways of retention and some sort of bonuses to sign on to make the city jobs better for outside candidates and then keep the bleeding down to minimum. We're working with the state labor office to come up with an apprenticeship program. We meet on a weekly basis. Today we had to cancel because of this meeting. We were going to meet at 12 o'clock to see how we're going to increase our recruiting. And we're planning with MOED a higher up event. We're working with DHR to be able to seal the deal at the table, because we realize sometimes our restrictions for minimum qualifications doesn't allow us to be able to get the individuals before they graduate, and then when they graduate, private can pick them up because they can be faster. So we're working with Director Herbert and DHR to provide a prototype type of hiring. So with a promise of we can go to those individuals before they actually graduated and then make offers, and then when they graduate, we can actually capture them right then there, rather than starting after they graduate, because our civil service hiring process, respectfully so, is a little extended compared to private. So those are all of the things that now we're trying to address, all at the same time. Sign-on bonus, trying to bring them as a retention bonus, develop an apprenticeship program with the state's labor department, go into those schools, but just not, again, the idea of we need to be able to get them fast. So that's an HR thing that we're trying to solve with. So didn't want to come across as just like we're just like throwing up our hands and then we have 40 mechanics. That's why the problem. We're very actively trying to solve that issue.
Yeah, thank you. And so how long have these 5 trucks been off the street?
I don't know at the top of my,
Anybody from fire? How long have these 5 trucks been off the street?
We're getting that, probably, thinking about 2 weeks so far. We're losing some of the trucks, back and forth. You know, sometimes we brought some back and then they break down again and we take them
Sure.
out.
Yeah.
So we've been back and forth with it.
And there's no reserves in these companies right now?
Truck companies, no, they're not. We don't have any reserve trucks at this time.
Only reserve engines?
Correct. And we have put some engines in where trucks have gone. And Chief Stewart works on a daily basis trying to replace units that are out of service in a strategic way so that we're not losing coverage. So that's
Right,
what
and
he's been
you're,
working on.
we get the daily run, so we know where the busiest.
And we also still deal with staffing issues as well that we're, you know,
Sure, I think we've dealt with that in another hearing, but I'm sure we'll deal with that again.
yes, ma'am.
So, okay, well, I want to make, so the maintenance piece is critical in that we have fewer mechanics, but also we've got parts, particularly for the older engines and trucks, you know, to try to I mean, I have an old Toyota, so I know what I know. But, it's still, I mean, can't we go to some of our neighboring jurisdictions and say, and I don't know how that works. Obviously, our neighboring jurisdictions have really helped us out a lot this year, and we're grateful to them. But it's totally unacceptable to have all of these, you know, not on the street when we have the busiest fire department basically in the nation. And so can't we borrow? I don't know how it works, but
They're dealing with the same issues we're dealing with. That's, we have reached out to them. And
Oh,
a
you
lot
have?
of times they have the same issues that we have as well.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I want to acknowledge Councilman Costello, who's joined the meeting. I'm going to hand off to Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what I haven't heard in this conversation, or maybe if I missed it, my apologies. I guess what have been the operational challenges with the shortages? Or has there been a reduction in response time? Like, what are the outcomes of this that you've seen on your end?
We're still getting our units. We have a specific number that we have to get engines there, and due to our overall coverage of the city in general, we usually make those numbers. It's you know, the EFF number that we're supposed to, or that's required, but no, it has not affected much of our coverage time. No.
Okay.
Our EFF number is 81%, and traditionally we're around 80%.
Sorry, can you give me EFF?
EFF, effective firefighter force, which means getting on the scene within a specific amount of time. It's 4 minutes and 40 seconds to have someone there ready to go. And we've been hitting that 81% of the time. And we also, some of that is with those numbers. In the past, we've always been doing well, but we had the staffing where we could monitor our responses. So like the way it's measured is that when the units get there, they push at the scene, and then it registers in our CAD, so we're able to track when those units get there. Sometimes either because of what's going on, whoever the officer or the unit is, they may not push that button, so it may affect where, even though they were on the scene, it may affect how it registered in our system to track it. We used to have someone that would go and evaluate every call, and if that was the case, he would make the correction in the EFF, and then at that time, we were up around 90%, a little over 90%. We don't have the staffing and the abilities to do that anymore, and a lot of times we have to rely on the actual officers and the members doing the proper thing with the electronics. And as you know, well, as you can imagine, pulling up on the scene of something, you know, there is up and they may forget, so.
Okay. The second question I had is, I guess, adjacently related to the equipment concerns. In the Board of Inquiry report related to the Stricker Street fire, on page 127 of the report, it talks about the rapid intervention team bags and sort of equipment shortages on that end. When I was reading through the report, both this particular concern and the concern on page 134 pertaining to batteries and the ability to charge electrical equipment. Wondering if you could just speak to how these equipment shortages are being addressed within the department now. Two, that sort of came to mind to me, Mr. Chair, because I know it's like sort of somewhat of a different subject. It mentioned that there were issues with charging the equipment. Is that something that modern fire equipment should have? Like, I didn't quite understand how that could be the case at the scene of the fire, that, you know, there's not some sort of, I don't want to make it sound simple, like a place to plug something in, but like, I don't know how that's a part of your calculations overall, and like the equipment that you're using, the things that are coming on the scene. Like, I guess just sort of a broader question about the equipment access challenges.
So for the RIT bags, we've always had a truck, every truck company is incorporated with RIT equipment. An engine company is a RIT unit. They gather that off and they gather in the front. I'll let Chief Case talk about how we've upgraded that, excuse me. And then some of the electrical equipment and batteries, also some of the issues we run into there is the atmosphere that you're working in. You know, some of these electronic drills and those type of things may have some issues with the smoke and what's been dealing with. But I'll let Chief Case, because that was one of the things we started to address immediately.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in the report, it notes that there were just literally not enough RIT bags, and also just not enough batteries for the equipment needed, the saws and whatnot, to try and get through to the scene.
Well, there were enough RIT bags. It was just gathering them and getting them to where they needed to be. That was one of the things, which is what we've been trying to work on, so you don't have to go around and find a truck company to gather the RIT bags, where they're more accessible, so you can gather them quickly where you need to go and not have to go from truck to truck, because some of the times when you're on an incident, you know, you have apparatus that may park a block and a half away due to access. So if you have to go get that, but we have worked on addressing that.
As far as the RIT bags go, we're in the purchasing process right now of buying them for every engine company in the city and every battalion chief car.
Okay.
So basically, every piece of equipment will have a RIT bag on them. And we've also just improved, changed the RIT bags, changed the equipment composition, and for improved, we've drastically improved them. So.
And I guess to the other question about, just this point about like there being an inability to charge the equipment on the scene of the fire, is that something that's also being addressed? And are the vehicles that you're looking to acquire, do they expand those kind of capabilities so that this isn't something that we run into in the future? Well,
I forgot to mention, we are buying additional batteries for each piece of apparatus too, that has the battery-powered saws and drills and things like that.
Okay. I have other questions on that, but I'm sure we'll probably have another opportunity to talk.
Yes, you will. Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I did have a question. As we kind of go into the phased approach for maintenance, bringing on new apparatuses, what is the plan for I'm thinking of my regular job, excuse me, for firefighter safety? Also, if there's any type of injury and or lack of response time to community members. So the larger question is, who is responsible for that? And how are you all mitigating those circumstances based on the issues with maintenance, apparatus development, and things like that?
Can you be who is responsible? Yeah, it's who is responsible for the safety of the citizens?
Yeah, so it's a two-part question, sir.
Okay.
Who is responsible, or what type of mitigation strategies are you all as a department putting in place? So say, for instance, since we are down five engine, I always get this wrong, engine trucks? Yes. Since we are down 5 trucks, if there is lack of response time to respective communities, who is responsible for that, and how are you all incorporating those mitigating strategies within your current operations?
So as far as mitigating it, what we have been doing is we call them special service units. What we do is we put firefighters into cars, if we have cars available, and we put them in service in some of the places where some of the apparatus are out of service. And then what they could do is they can go out on some of the lower acuity calls, like service calls for those different types of things. And they're staffed with firefighters, and sometimes we even do it for, it's called medical support units.
Okay.
They'll go out, and what they could do is they can at least do some initial until we can get a medic there. So, but that's what we do normally when we respond for a medic assist, when we send an engine company out. So they have the abilities to at least get there and get some treatment going initially. And same way, what it does is by having the support units, they can go out and handle the lower things, unusual odors, those type of things that we're called for, so that the fire companies, the ones that respond to the fires, are still available in case those calls come in.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do what we can with those units to at least backfill the calls, so that we're not sending fire calls on all them out to those type of units, so we could keep them in service as long as we can.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm hearing you're talking about is the prioritization of response calls based on what it actually is, and not having the full fleet go
Right.
out for odorous calls. However, I just want us to really think through that a little bit more, and I'm not, disrespecting your professional opinion, but we had a situation in Pigtown where there was a consistent odor, and then it kind of escalated into something else. And so I'm wondering how and what that evaluation looks like of those lower priority calls, and how they can kind of go higher to that, like some of our higher calls.
Well, the 911 call takers and then communications, there are people down there that make an evaluation on the type of call that it is. And you're 100% right that, sometimes a call that comes in is something that seems like a low acuity could end up. But we have systems in place at communications that they follow along, as opposed to, just like we have systems in place for what they're with the dispatching too. So multiple calls, those type of things, and there's several systems that they have to follow as to who they're going to dispatch and when.
And so just connecting it back to the apparatus question, if there is not a engine available, if there's not a paramedic available, what are you all doing to mitigate that? So you know what I'm saying? Like I've been in, particularly engine 20, truck engine 23. I always get it mixed up. In Pigtown, whereby I've been sitting at dinner with them eating, and there will be a call come in, and you literally see, just the engines going out, and there's some times where there's no engines whatsoever to respond to those calls.
So, if we get to a point where we either have a lot out on calls, what we try to do at that point in time is we will, if we're struggling with the amount of units in service, so if we have a major alarm of fire or those type of things, what we'll do sometimes is we'll drop it down. So normally when we get a call, credible call for a report of a fire, and it comes in that way, we'll send out, it's 6 engines, 2 trucks, battalion chiefs. If we're getting to a critical stage with our staffing as far as units in service, whether it's for EMS or multiple alarms or multiple fires going on throughout the city, first thing is we do get mutual aid if we're short that way, and the jurisdictions will help us with that. And then also at times what we'll do is we'll reduce the responses from, instead of sending out all those engines and trucks, based on the type of call and how it comes in, we may only send 2 engines in a truck so that we could keep units in service. So at least we're getting someone there that if it is something where the call may be one thing and we get there, we find it's another, at least we have units there that can at least take an initial attack on it while we get the rest of the other units there, as well as keeping other units in service for other calls that come in.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Chair, I have one more question. Thank you. This is for the administration. When we're talking about modeling for the apparatus that's coming in, what is going to be your breaking point of kind of not relying on COVID as a kind of a barrier to some of the supply chain issues, and how are you all working with the federal and state delegation to kind of move these things along so that we can address these issues here in the city?
For the modeling, I think we would be conservative and take the historical delivery timelines in account, at least for the foreseeable future. But if you're extending the modeling it out, I would say that we would bring it back down to what we have seen historically as an average prior to COVID. The reason why we need to do that, because we need to look at two things. Each year's dollar value, how much of that is going to be for fire, how much that is actually takes replacement in, and we would then say, okay, if taking an asset this year that's going to take 3 years down the road, we would then age that asset for 3 years for the replacement coming in, and then calculate an average age of the fleet based on those assumptions. And then we would look at it at what year, under one scenario, we're going to hit that sweet spot to be determined, and then that's how we would do it. I don't think that I can answer engaging state and federal and other entities to support the timelines, but what one thing that we could be banking more on is to cooperative contracts, and then utilizing them as our best option because they're vetted, they're competitively bid, and then many people order off of them. So if we can get into those by ordering multiple, that might be the one way of using the state and federal resources to get apparatus and others.
I appreciate that, and I'd like to, I don't know if this was a formal request to sit in or receive that briefing for modeling. I'd like to be in that conversation as well.
State it one more time.
So the formal request, I believe it was from Councilman Cohen about the modeling. Is that going to be sent to the entire committee, or?
That should be sent to the committee.
Yes.
Okay, and perfect. And so just to clarify, my communication with state and federal partners, that's more of a question for Sophia. We need to start engaging and leveraging our state and federal partnerships about those supply chain issues because it's happening nationally. We need to figure out and really develop a national approach to support what these agencies actually need. So thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Porter. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To General Services, just to get back to maintenance a little bit. How long have you been here, sir?
With Department of General Services, my second go-around as the director as of June 1st, 2022. So coming up 6 months.
All right. So I've been employed with the city of Baltimore now for close to 24 years. I worked in the Department of Public Works for 16 of those years. I'm a CDL driver, and many times myself, co-workers, we've taken equipment over to Biddle Street to get service. Sometimes it's just a bandage put on, ship it out to the yard, and the very next day, sometimes the same day, the equipment is coming right back to Biddle Street. So I'm wondering, are we having the same issues with the fire department? This is a safety matter. We're dealing with people's lives here. Just today, it's floating all over social media right now. We had a shooting in Park Heights to the fire department. If you can stand as well, please. We had a shooting today in Park Heights. It took about maybe 15 minutes for medics to arrive. I think a fire engine may have come a little sooner. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's all over social media, right now, in reference to a shooting that happened in Park Heights. And I'm wondering if, we're not having the proper equipment because, the fire department is there, the engine is there first, and medics is coming at a later time. Where are we getting that other medics truck from if the equipment is down at Biddle Street or wherever our equipment is located? How do we have that medics respond to that situation that just occurred?
So for that, I'd have to look into the response times on that if you would give me some time to look into that. But what I can do is, on shooting calls, we send the nearest fire unit as well as a medic unit so that we get someone there immediately. I'd have to look in to see this particular incident, what were the response times, and what, if any, issues were arised out of that. So I can't answer on that one because this is the first I'm hearing of it. So we're going to look into our CAD and see exactly where that is and what happened with that.
And I heard you mention early on that we had, I think, maybe 5 engines that were out.
Truck companies,
Truck?
sir. Yes.
Okay. That were out. And I also heard from some resources that these engines may be out because of something small like a PM or maybe a oil leak or maybe a gas line that hoses need to be replaced. I'm asking, is this true? Because we can no longer hide like any of this. According to the report that just came out from the fire department, people's lives are at stake here. And this is very, very important. We can no longer have, and I feel like we don't need any more outside individuals coming to Baltimore. We need to hire within our division, within our department. That's where the talent is. So I need you guys to really take things seriously and keep things transparent with the city council, with the citizens of Baltimore, because they deserve it. Because the latest report that we've seen with those 3 firefighters that had lost their lives, that prior to them going into that home, it was once a fire there, and they had no clue they were going back into a home where it was going to be unsafe or an empty, property that was unsafe. But we lost 3 lives. We can no longer have that happen again.
Yes, believe me, the 3 of us take it very seriously, and we're all internal people within the department. As far as the report goes, there are plenty of things I would love to discuss and have conversations about that report because, those reports are opinions of that panel, and I would love to be able to talk with all of you about that to discuss that report. Just like we plan on being completely transparent. We have nothing to hide. And the bottom line is that if my esteemed colleagues from the unions, if they reach out to you with issues, please call us, talk to us, ask us about those issues that were reached out to. I'd be more than happy to discuss them with you and to give you our side of where we are with that. I don't want to do things, I'll be more than happy to speak to any of you. You all have my number. Councilman Cohen, you have my number. We've spoken. I'll meet you for coffee again on the east side to discuss exactly what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. So we have no problem being transparent with anybody. Again, we have nothing to hide. We have issues that we're dealing with right now. Some can call them crisis. Some, they're serious issues that we need to deal with. We understand that. We're emergency service people, and we've been doing this for a long time, and we will deal with those issues. But again, it's been 4 days since we've been put into these positions, and we're trying to get what we need to get done as quickly as we can and to take immediate action on what we need to take action on. And I can swear to you that, yeah, sure, you got questions, call me, ask me. I'll get you, if I don't have the answer, I'll get it to you, or if it's concerns from constituents or unions, I'll be more than happy to discuss it with you. Anytime, sir.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. So, go ahead, sir.
I think my management team, Chief Lyons, have informed me that we do track the repeat work orders to your, that's what we call them if we had an asset in the shop and it came back again within a certain period of time, we track that. And that is about 6% of the total work order volume. Is the entire fleet, is not just specific to fire. If we're looking for that number specific to the fire, how many of those fire assets actually ended up back in the shop within a certain period of time, we can report on that. But it's not a very common occurrence, but is about 6%. And just for the volume purposes, Chief Lyons, do we know the general number of work orders to get a better sense? 6% of 2,000, 3,000, and we can produce that number as well.
So are you saying 6% of the total fleet,
6% of the total work.
no matter what agency?
No, I want to be very clear. So when an asset, vehicle, truck, engine comes to the shop, we open up a work order for it. So we can track what's being done, the cost, the time. And then we put that asset back in service. If the same asset shows up in any of our shops again, we will flag them as a repeat offender because it was not supposed to be back within a certain period of time. And then we have a different tracking mechanism for those work orders. So the number of those work orders as a total percentage to the total work orders is 6%. So 6%, if we had 3,000 work orders that we managed, about 6%, 180 would be the ones that they are back in the shop within a very short period of time.
So what actions do we take? So you're telling me if I was to bring a vehicle into Middle Street to get service, and you complete that vehicle service within maybe 2 days, I'm driving the vehicle, I'm coming back, bringing the vehicle back because of the same issue that I just had. What are you doing on your end? Because you know the mechanic from the work order who worked on the vehicle. What are you doing on your end to make sure that the mechanic is I don't reprimand it or whatever.
Held responsible?
Yes, he's responsible for the vehicle. We're already 40, mechanics, of hiring within the agency that we need, badly. What are we doing with individuals like that? And the reason why I'm saying, I'm telling you, even though you're telling me that you put them back on the street and they're working or whatever, I've drove those trucks to the point where we as drivers sometimes don't want to give the vehicle back because we know that this is a vehicle that's out of our fleet, and we can't do the work for the people if the vehicle is not in service. So what are we doing to make sure that we really keep these vehicles on the street and the maintenance is really being done?
So, sir, anytime a vehicle comes back in for a repeat repair.
The microphone, please.
Sorry, sir. So anytime a vehicle comes back into a shop for
Please
repeat repair.
please introduce yourself for the record as well.
Apologies.
Sorry.
Christopher Lyons, Chief of the Fleet Management Division, DGS. So in the case of repeat repairs, there's a complete problem-solving process that takes place every time one of those comes in. The system flags it when the work order is created, and then we start doing a series of different analysis. Was it a training issue? Was it a mechanic oversight issue? Why didn't we catch it in our QC process? Was it a part failure? Whatever the issue is, there's subsequent action that takes place from that point. So if a mechanic needs to be retrained, that's something we escalate right then and there. So
I completely understand what you're saying, but I'm telling you, these things don't happen. All right? 16 years I've been in the Department of Public Works.
Yes, sir.
All right? We've been forced to drive vehicles that were unsafe. Okay? It does not work. So you got to dig deeper into your fleet to find out exactly what's going on, because you're putting vehicles out on the street that are unsafe. And again, I'm quite sure I think the fire department has a total different slew of mechanics that work on those trucks. They got to be well-trained, specially trained to work on those vehicles. All right? We need quality mechanics and quality jobs to get this stuff done.
I don't disagree with you at all, sir.
All right, so please dig deep into it. We need our trucks on the street.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
I do want to say one thing. We don't blame the individual just because the asset is back, because like Chief Lyons said, we want to understand if it's our fault or it's an actual something else happened that, very reasonable to bring that asset back in the shop. So that's number one, look first. Because we could send something out and then the tire might blow, they might get into an accident that is nothing related to the mechanic's work. So that's the first thing that we do. If we realize that there is something in our locus of control that we failed to do, and we do that. And to your point, we do want specialized, great mechanics to work on our things, and tying it back to hiring the individuals from their apprenticeship programs or schools. It takes about 4 years of extensive work experience for us to be able to put them on specialized equipment like fire, and then DPW. So that's the part that we're struggling also, because they're just recently graduated, they're not going to be at the quality or the experience to be able to work in some of our specialized stuff.
Okay, I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
All right, so this is the first time we met, but just know, bro, I'm gonna be on you guys. I'm gonna hold you guys accountable. I'm like a nightmare you can't wake up from. I'm gonna be on it. I'm telling you, I'm gonna be on it.
We would like the challenge, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman, I have your answers for the shooting. Engine 45, the call was received at 10:01. Engine 45 was dispatched at 10:02. They went en route, which means they were on the wagon, ready to go, push the button out the door. At 10:03, they arrived on the scene at 10:08. EMS 5, which is a ALS first line medic officer, because it was a shooting, he was also, or she was also dispatched at 10:02. They got on the scene at 10:08. Initially, medic 18 was dispatched at 10:03. Then medic 8 picked up the call because they were closer, and the medic unit was actually on the scene at 10:11. So from time of dispatch, 10:02, to the time that the medic unit was on the scene was 10:11, so that's 9 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
And just so you know, minutes or seconds seems like hours if you're someone in distress and you need an emergency, services there. So sometimes what may seem like 20 minutes may only be 9 or 10 minutes. So, but those are your numbers, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Councilman. I'm going to afford around one question from all of us. I know these gentlemen are and ladies are incredibly busy, and I want to make sure that we get to some of the heart of some of these issues. And so, one question going around. My question is actually to our guest here today from the fire unions, Mr. Fannin and Mr. Langford. You alluded to a standard, the NFPA 911 standard for inspection, maintenance, testing, and retirement for in-service emergency vehicles. Can you tell me a little bit about that standard, what it attempts to accomplish, and why you presented that as something that might be worthwhile for us to consider as a committee?
Josh Fannin, again, Baltimore Fire Officers Union. The NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, is, as it's detailed in the letter, but for those who weren't aware, it's a group of technical experts that come together to write minimal industry standards for for the fire industry, the fire service. And some of the things that are detailed in there is exactly what kind of maintenance should be performed on specialized apparatus, on fire engines, on fire trucks. How do we test ladders, pumps, brake systems, things of that nature. What should we consider for a replacement schedule? Now, the replacement schedule part of it is a little bit broad because it does talk about the fact that you have to consider the wear and tear to that specific vehicle in the environment that it's in, because this is a national standard, and you do have locations where they don't have calls to service too frequently, so the apparatus conceivably could be at frontline service a lot longer. I can tell you, however, that any standard that you use to measure, that is not the case for Baltimore City. Baltimore City is a very active, very busy, very high call volume jurisdiction. So that's where you need to weigh all that in there and having what the standard would be. So the bottom line is, we know where we are now. It seems that following a written industry standard that already is in existence for us, which is actually written so that it can be adopted by local legislation. Local legislatures who, authority having jurisdiction, could just simply pass legislation that says whatever the current NFPA standard is and related to this subject matter, we're interested in adopting that because that's the highest standard that's available out there. So that way, when we buy new apparatus, like we talked about today, We have new apparatus, we have older apparatus. We know when the older apparatus should be moving to reserve status, when it should be taken out. Once the new apparatus comes in, we know what the standard is for it to be maintained by our fleet maintenance mechanics and everything that goes along with the care and service of the vehicle for its lifespan and planning for the future, its replacement. So that's why we were encouraging you to take a look at that currently 117-page document, which would maybe warrant even further hearing on because there's a lot of stuff in there. But it's worthy of consideration that it is all-encompassing. It does address all these issues that we talked about today. Thank you.
Chief, anything you want to add to that?
Just to touch on that a little bit. So NFPA is as exactly what President Fannin spoke about. But NFPA also does not take into consideration budgetary issues, what we need to do to meet those standards, and all those things that we as an agency have to go through to make those standards happen. We meet the majority of NFPA standards throughout over the board, not with maintenance or staffing and all that. We meet response times and all that. So we're pretty good on keeping up with NFPA standards. The people that create these standards, they don't need to worry about what's it going to cost for a department, especially like Baltimore City, or any large agency to meet those standards. That's not something they take into consideration. So they just put those standards out there as a national standard. So we would love to meet all those standards 100% of the time, but we also have some things we run across when it comes to that. So yes, that's what we try to do.
So do we at all keep track, or are we capable of pulling together, for instance, a report of the vehicles that do meet that standard or don't meet that standard today?
Do we keep a Not specifically 1911, but we can.
Okay. And then to back into that question as well, this goes to DGS. Is DGS aware of that standard? And how do we think about our maintenance cycle and otherwise a replacement cycle for vehicles with that in mind?
So from a DGS perspective, sir, I'm very familiar with 1911.
Great.
The challenge with 1911 is that it's not a vehicle-specific standard. It is a process standard. So it has unilateral application across all apparatus. From a maintenance and inspection and testing perspective, in terms of periodic and program maintenance, we are by and large in compliance with 1911. But again, it covers everything from the daily pre-trips all the way through the entire life cycle management of the asset. And again, there is a lot of operational issues that would be impacted by full implementation of, excuse me, of 1911, which I would defer to the fire department.
Sure, that's super helpful. I'd be curious, with that additional context that it is a process-based consideration, I'm really curious what pieces of the process we have already adopted, and even more to consider which ones we should consider adopting in light of our discussion here today. Thank you. So I'll look for that report. Do we have, how much time would it take for us to get in, to get feedback on how many of our vehicles meet the standard, how much of the processes we already adopt?
For all of our vehicles, probably about a month for them to review and go over it and get you that information.
Okay. That's
Fair
fine.
enough?
That's fine, yeah. So we'll look for it in the new year. Thank you. I'll hand off to Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These questions for fire department and union leadership. So I think everyone's in agreement that we haven't spent enough money maintaining our apparatus. Agreed. Chief?
Well, we've made an effort to do what we can with the money we have, yes.
Let me,
We're
let
going.
me reframe that question for you. The city of Baltimore has not allocated enough money for the fire department and DGS to adequately maintain its apparatus. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here. We're doing the best with what we have.
I'll take care of that part.
Okay.
Yep, Director.
Sir.
Were there requests put in from the fire department for ARPA funding? For fire apparatus?
I don't think we have put in equipment replacement in ARPA funds. I have to check because, I arrived once after the requests were made, so I have to check if we had put in a request or not.
Chief?
Did you say
ARPA requests.
We put in for facilities because our facilities are aging as well.
Okay. We didn't put in any requests for vehicles or apparatus?
No, we did not. We put in for, again, we have 100-year-old firehouses. We're having a lot of problems with them too. We put in for that.
Totally get it and understand where the priority is. And do we get awarded anything through ARPA for fire for these facilities?
I'll let Chief Case answer that one.
The only thing I'm aware of is a joint effort between us and the health department for a COVID-19, or actually a pandemic, storage facility for PPE for any future, or the current pandemic and any future pandemics. We were awarded a 5-year lease of a warehouse to do that, and that's the only thing I'm aware of right now with ARPA funds. I
So,
believe that was awarded to the health department specifically, but we were piggybacked on that.
so we had a $641 million pot of money, and the only thing that the fire department got was a lease of a warehouse? Do I understand that correctly?
That's all I've been notified.
Okay. Can I go back to the director of DGS?
Yes.
Director, would it have been on the fire department to request ARPA funding for new apparatus and capital maintenance of existing apparatus, or would that have been on DGS?
No, it would have been through DGS.
Would have been on through DGS? And
With coordinating with them, obviously, but the request would have come from
your
DGS.
agency?
Yes.
And I know this precedes your time here, so I recognize I'm physically pointing a finger at you, but I'm not actually pointing a finger at you. So, Chief Lyon, you were here before, correct? Correct. Can you come up, please? So, did you all put in any requests for ARPA dollars for new apparatus or for capital maintenance of existing apparatus?
I'd have to go back and look at my notes, sir, but I believe we did. We did for, with BPD. Okay, I stand corrected. No, we did not for fire.
Do you know why we didn't?
No, I don't.
Because everyone from the fire department the union leadership and the command staff all seem to be in agreement that we have a significant capital need, right? Okay. Is this something that's on the mayor's office's radar, Sophia?
Good afternoon, sir. I'm not aware, but we can get back to you about that.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
We can get back to you on that.
Okay. Well, I would definitely appreciate, Mr. Chair, if you would consider that as a formal committee request, because I'd be very curious why, again, we have $641 million, and it doesn't seem that any of this money is going to this significant capital need that seems to be a matter of life and death for our employees and for our residents. So I look forward to hearing back from you. You think I can expect a response by call of business on Friday, Sophia? Thank you very much. Chief?
Yeah, just so you know, we also have the ESPP funds that we have 3-stage plan for facilities as well as new firehouses as well. Nice.
That's an alarm that seems to be going off. Has now been stopped. Apparently it serves its function. It gets everyone's attention. So,
Yes. So
my apologies, sir.
We are trying to use those funds that were coming back that we've been able to secure with our facilities as well. So we are working to upgrade our facilities, and we're just trying to prioritize the use of them as much as we can.
Got it.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Cohen. Councilman Burnett.
Yeah, I have well, I want to thank my colleague for asking that question, because it does appear that the police department got fleet dollars. So clearly there's a need on both ends, because they're, I would imagine, probably the two most, probably next to DPW as far as wear and tear on the vehicles. So I do think that that's something that we should dig a little bit further into. The other question I had, and I realize, again, we'll address this at a separate hearing, but related to the BOI report, there were a number of just general equipment recommendations that were made. If you go to page 110 on the report, there's a graphic that shows the recommendations that were leveraged from the convening of these groups going back to 2006, and just flagging that there are related to, radios and other equipment recommendations that were made dating back several years prior to this fire. And so I just want to lift up more of a statement that this issue of equipment availability is, as much as we're talking about apparatus, the equipment that our firefighters have on scene is also, in my opinion, as important as well to have figured out. And so I do look forward to having a deeper conversation moving forward on what the concrete plan is, not only for apparatus replacement, but these other issues that not only are mentioned in this particular report, but appear to have been recommendations from the BOI in previous incidences, and it appears that.
And just on that, a lot of the recommendations that were in that report, we've addressed. We've addressed a lot of them. We're still working on some of the other ones that take time a little bit because they're a little bit more involvement, but a lot of the ones that came out, and some of the other ones that we had addressed at one point in time and got shut down for various reasons, especially the code X-ray that is being talked about a lot. That was a policy and a procedure we had in place years ago, and we were told to shut it down by past administrations. So this was before, I was in the department, but that was something we were working on at that point in time to do that. So, it's what was in that report is not just being dismissed. We take it very seriously, and we're looking at ways to meet some of those recommendations. Some of them we can do, which we have a Chief Stewart has worked very hard on putting together a nice vacant program right now that we're out working on. Even as we speak, he has people out with community representatives working on areas. So we're working on that. We put together, and we've been doing it too, a firefighter rescue and survival class that we put out the Fire Academy. We got the funding from that from grant money. We put our firefighters through that prior to this happening, because I was the director of training for a while. We put that out there. We've sent some of our units, some of our special operations people away to New York, to Virginia Beach for structural collapse classes so that we could do it. We've restructured our special operations units. Chief Stewart restructured that, their leadership and how they respond and what they do. So there's a lot of things in that report that we are to have taken, well, we take everything in it seriously, but there are a lot of things we've addressed right away. And we're still working on some of the other ones in there too. So, again, if you could just, I don't want to keep saying we're working on it, but if you could just give us some patience, we can make a lot of this stuff and deal with a lot of these things.
And my response would be absolutely, and I'm sure we'll work with the chair to figure out an appropriate time. I would say in preparation for that hearing, I'm most interested in sort of the systemic changes that are being made, as in it's one thing to sort of restock the trucks in sort of the immediate sense, but I guess what are we, similar to what you guys have been working with DGS on, as far as just figuring out how do we make long-term changes to procurement of the vehicles. I'm just for that hearing, I'm interested in knowing what are the sort of system changes for equipment as well. to ensure that this isn't something that, that changes depending on who's in charge of the department or what administration is in office, but just
Right.
sort of
I got
how
you.
we do things in the fire department and how are we doing it moving forward as far as
I
policy
would love
changes
for us
go.
to be first in line for procurement at every meeting, believe me. That
I-
would be
I
awesome.
understand.
But
I understand. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and we will have a hearing on that report and have an opportunity to go piece by piece through it and
Sure.
understand
Absolutely.
what we need to do to shore up our.
Yeah, well, again, as I said before, we have nothing to hide.
Yep, I appreciate it. And Councilwoman Porter and Councilman Glover. Thank you. With that, I want to thank you all for digging into this issue, the fire department, DGS, our unions. This is an incredibly important issue. It is our first responders, not just for the first responders and their ability to do their job, but to the people who rely on them in life or death situations. So, this is not an easy issue to resolve. We're talking about limited money. We're talking about limited people and resources. We're talking about shortages within the DGS and otherwise. But I think it's precisely why we have this hearing today. So I want to thank you all for coming in today, and this hearing is in recess. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll keep working. All of us came up through the ranks, so we know exactly what we need to do to get it done.
Thank you.
Thank you.